Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John, and led them up a high mountain where they could be alone. There in his presence he was transfigured. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Suddenly Moses and Elijah appeared to them. They were talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is wonderful for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He was still speaking when suddenly a bright cloud covered them with shadow. And from the cloud there came a voice that said, "This is my son, the beloved. He enjoys my favor. Listen to him." When they heard this, the disciples fell on their faces, overcome with fear. But Jesus came up and touched them. "Stand up," he said. "Do not be afraid." And when they raised their eyes, they saw no one but only Jesus. As they came down from the mountain, Jesus gave them this order: "Tell no one about this vision until the Son of Man has risen from the dead." The Gospel of the Lord. Perhaps you have heard of Malcolm Muggeridge. He was a British author, satirist, radio and television personality who lived between 1903 and 1990. Whenever he was interviewed and the theme of Christianity came up, he ridiculed and belittled religious faith. However, at one point, the British Broadcasting Corporation asked him to go to Calcutta to work on a documentary about a little Albanian nun who was receiving much attention for her charitable work. Today we know her as St. Teresa of Calcutta. Malcolm went with his crew to begin the work on the documentary, filming and taking interviews. There was one particular day when the film crew told him that the light in the House of the Dying where they were filming was inadequate and was a waste of film. However, when the film was developed, the whole interior was bathed in a mysterious light, a glow that could not be explained. This was one step in the conversion of Malcolm Muggeridge to Catholicism. In 1982, he and his wife were baptized in the Catholic faith. And after that moment, whenever he was interviewed and the subject of religion came up, you could not shut him up. He went on to write 26 books about Jesus and Christian faith. I thought of this true story when I first read the Gospel of today. Just as Peter, James, and John encountered Jesus on Mount Tabor, and I'm sure that their lives were changed forever, so too the encounter of Malcolm Muggeridge with Jesus in Calcutta influenced his life tremendously. In our first reading from Genesis, we see how Abram, overwhelmed with the promises and blessings of God. Abraham had no idea what God was going to do, especially in his life. But Abram gave his yes, and not only his life changed dramatically, but that of the chosen people. In our second reading from the second letter of St. Paul to Timothy, we see that just like Abram, God has a plan for us. His grace is powerful, and when we give our yes to Jesus, we open the gates to graces and blessings. Our gospel tells us of this transfiguration of Jesus, that his earthly presence was transformed before the eyes of Peter, James, and John, and with him were Moses and Elijah. Moses representing the law books of the Old Testament, and Elijah representing the prophetic tradition. This echoes the words of Jesus, that he did not come to abolish the law and the prophets, but to complete them. This shows the continuity of revelation between these three. I can imagine that when Peter, James, and John came down Mount Tabor, they were never the same because of this revelation of Jesus as the Son of God, with whom he is very well pleased. As I reflected on the readings, I saw 2 important realities: the revelation of the power of God, and how that power affected change in those who said yes to God. The same power of God is revealed to us, perhaps not as dramatically as on Mount Tabor with the Transfiguration, if we open ourselves to God. Abram, Paul, and Peter, James, and John, all were willing to be open to God's revelation, to God's word and presence. This transformed their lives, and through them faith in God was established, renewed, and restored. That same power of God and that same power to be transformed by God is ours if we are open to it. This brings me to another point of the story of Malcolm Muggeridge. After his conversion, he no longer spoke in terms of coincidences, but rather of God-incidences. He came to believe that the things that happened to him were not an accident or fate or a coincidence, but that God had a hand in all of it. If we could believe that, we would open ourselves to so many graces. God's grace and power are waiting for us to turn to the Lord and give our yes in a new and deeper way. This season of Lent is a particular time of grace in which God and the Church call us to do just that, to be brave, as was Abram, and open ourselves to God's promptings, to be encouraged by our salvation in Jesus Christ, and walk in faith as He leads and guides us, and to, like Peter, James, and John, prepare ourselves for the revelation of Jesus before our very eyes. This calls us to have faith that these marvels we hear in the readings can take place in our time and place, that God's love and mercy is the same today as it was then, and that His power to work in and through us is the same as it was with Abram, Paul, Timothy, Peter, James, and John. The price of this life with God and our witness in the life of the community is opening ourselves to Jesus in our prayer, in attentive listening to His word, in sharing sincerely in the sacramental life of the Church, and by sharing in the life of His community. We do all of that when we gather on the day of the Lord, each and every weekend when we worship together here. I doubt that Jesus will be transfigured before us as we celebrate together, but Jesus is being made manifest as that Son in whom the Father is well pleased in the Word and Sacrament. Jesus becomes present and is made manifest when we reflect on His saving Word and share in His saving sacraments. At this point, we are beginning only our second week of Lent. These particular readings this weekend are indeed a godsend and a God incidence, so that we can make of this Lenten season one of abundant grace, of God renewing our yes to Christ and opening ourselves not only to God's grace, but to God's ongoing revelation to those who trust in Him.